What's up, y'all? It's me, it's your boy Asmongold, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about loot distribution systems and which one your guild should use. Now, a lot of people, BRF just came out, so people are trying to look to join guilds and looking to maybe even make their own guilds. I mean, you guys know we raid for perps, and so we're going to look at the different ways to get those perps and the best ways and the worst ways. Now, guys, I'm going to give you guys a spoiler right now, is that there is no best loot system. Okay, it's not like Loot Council is the best loot system. It's not like DKP, EPGP. These are the best loot systems now. Now I'm going to talk about three main loot systems, and then I'm going to talk about like two other ones, kind of a little bit maybe tangentially. Okay, and we're going to get those out of the way right now. Now, the first one is obviously just straight up group loot. Okay, and group loot is just it's real simple. An item drops, players in a group roll on it. This is really good for pugs, but it's not very good for guilds because like if one guy is winning all the stuff, that's not really good for everybody else, and like people can roll on things that aren't really as big of an upgrade, and it causes a lot of different problems. Now, the positives with group loot is that of course you can you just get it's out of the way in 3 minutes, right? Because that's how long the loot window is, and so it's very fast, and it's also there's no real way that like the officers or like the guild leader or something like that can manipulate group loot, and so it's like the item drops, you roll on it, right? And so it's very transparent, and that's a very good thing. There's a lot to be said for that. And so, in my opinion, I think group loot is very good to be used in like kind of like very casual-ish guilds. And another thing that's very good for casual guilds is just using personal loot. Now, in my opinion, I don't really I hate personal loot, and I don't really like to use it ever because it makes it to where you can't really funnel the right gear to the right players, and also you can get repeat items. But personal loot is very efficient, especially whenever you just come into an instance and nobody really has any gear, so there aren't going to be any possibilities of somebody getting a duplicate item or anything similar to that. And so in that way, personal loot is useful, but at the same time, unless you're running a very casual guild or a pug, I would recommend using a different system besides personal loot. Group loot is a little bit better, but in my opinion, as I said before, I would use something else. Now, another system that's like this is like one of the main systems that people sometimes use, and it's like not very common, but it's called SK or Suicide Kings, and what it does is it pretty much puts everybody on a list, and it'll be like Asmongold, and then like the rest of the people in my guild, like maybe above or below me, depending on how last time that I got an item. And every single time somebody gets an item, it puts them at the bottom of the list, and then whenever you're at the top of the list, you have priority over an item. Now, this is very good because, again, it's very transparent. Everybody's got the same list, and especially everybody at least knows their place on the list. And so if they wake up and they see themselves at the bottom of the list, there's going to be some problems. But either way, I don't really like this system either, and the reason for that is that, again, like let's say you have somebody who's like a group 6 player, or I guess group 5 now, and what I mean by that is like somebody who's like on standby a lot, and they don't really spend a whole lot of time in a raid, but you kind of need them for backup, and maybe they're just like they've been in the guild for a while, and so they're useful in some circumstances, but they're not really in like the core progression group, if that makes sense. And so you have this person, and this person gets up to the top of the list because they're not in raid a whole lot of times. And so whenever they are in the raid, they pretty much get first pick on any item. That's a very bad system because you're rewarding players who aren't putting in the performance. And it's very important for people to think that they're being rewarded for what they're doing. Now, also another thing with this, with the group loot, personal loot, and the Suicide Kings thing, is it's very hard to actually administer direct punishment for a mistake, or also direct, I guess, like reward for doing things that are favorable to your guild. Now, the best way to do this is then EP, GP, and DKP are in a lot of ways the same, and I'm going to make the distinction here. Now, DKP stands for Dragon Kill Points. A lot of people don't know that, but it actually came from EverQuest. And what DKP is it's pretty much whenever you complete some sort of action in a guild function, you get points, right? And so, like, let's say you join your raid, and being on time is 5 points, and then killing a boss is 10 points. Killing a new progression boss is 20 points. Sometimes, like we used to do things where everybody would get 20 points if like we killed the boss within like the next like 3 pulls or something like that. And so different incentives, and it's a very good way to incentivize good behavior and also punish bad behavior minus 50 DKP. If you guys have ever seen that the Onyxia wipe thing, I don't even know where. I guess like you could YouTube it or something. But it was like a guy, and he was like screaming at people, and whenever somebody would do something wrong, they would lose DKP. And so DKP is basically used as a tertiary currency in terms of how you buy loot in the game. And so you have like this separate currency that's maintained by like an officer or like the group of officers or the guild leader or something like that, and you take that DKP and you bid DKP for items. It's like gold. You're pretty much bidding your gold, and instead of gold, it's DKP. It's actually pretty simple once you understand it. And so one thing that's really good about this is that, as I said before, it's a very easy way to incentivize good behavior and punish bad behavior. Example, like one way that this is a lot better than Loot Council in terms of that is that let's say, for example, you have somebody who like kept dying on a fight, and then you end up not giving them loot like the next day whenever you kill a fight, because the punishment isn't directly really related to the result or the action that they took that you're kind of like punishing them for. There's kind of a disconnect there, and it's kind of like a psychology thing where people are going to be thinking that they're punished for nothing, or that you're holding things against them that happened a while back. And DKP, you can administer a direct punishment for a direct action, and also, of course, as I said before, a direct reward for a direct favorable action. An example of a favorable thing would be like my old guild, because we ran DKP, and I used to like it. It's like actually my second, like EPGP and DKP are very similar, and EPGP is just a little bit different. I'll talk about that after I finish this. And like you had like an OTB, and that was an on-time bonus. And so if you got to raid 30 minutes beforehand, before the raid was actually supposed to start, you got like 15 extra DKP or something like that. It wasn't like a lot, but it was a good amount. And because we had like 5 raids every night, it really added up. And so players were incentivized to be early and be ready. And that also helped the raid leaders and officers determine who's going to be in the groups and also know who's going to be online and everything else like that. So we're not making last minute decisions after the raid already started. And so DKP is very, very good for that. Some issues with that is actually some of the people in my old guild after like we kind of went on hiatus for a while in Wrath of the Lich King, they kind of made like this, I guess like placeholder guild. And the guy who was the raid leader of that placeholder guild, or like the officer, or like he was like, a very, very important person in the guild, I guess, like maybe like the guild leader or second in command. Well, what he did, basically, what it comes down to, is that he shaved off DKP from other players, or he also gave himself DKP. I don't really remember which one, but either way, this was like a, like an instant death thing, and like everybody left the guild because of it. And so it's very volatile. And so if you have a guild, or like you don't really trust like your officer core or your leadership core, DKP can kind of come back and bite you in the ass that way. And also, it can be kind of bad if you have people hoarding DKP. And this is, I'm actually really glad that I remembered this, because this is actually what happened in my guild in Firelands. And we actually used EPGP. And I'm actually right now, I'll talk about the difference between DKP and EPGP. EPGP basically adds a secondary number, and you're judged on like your ratio, or at least this is how we did it in our guild. And so our ratio of EP to GP, and so every single time you get an item, that gives you GP, and every single time that you perform a guild action, basically your EP is your, is your DKP, and your GP would be what would be subtracted away from your DKP if you were to roll on an item. And the person who has the highest ratio has first priority on the item. And so again, this is a pretty good way of dealing out items, and it's very good for mid-level guilds. And the reason for that is that people who put in a lot of work are usually more easily rewarded, and also it allows people to kind of come in, or at least EPGP does, come in and start getting loot pretty early and not just have it all funneled to the older members and never really get a chance for anything. And so that is a good thing. One negative thing about it also, this kind of ties into the hoarding DKP, is we also had people who were on standby, and those people who were on standby never really got a chance to spend their GP. So I remember in Firelands, like one of our like standby players got a best in slot necklace over me, and the reason that happened is because he was on standby all the time that I was actually progressing and working on killing this boss, and then because he never had a chance to spend his EP. He came in there and he got an item prioritized over me because of just the way the system worked. And so like that really rubbed me the wrong way, and I was really, really mad about that. And I actually like threatened to quit the guild about it, because that I didn't really think that was fair, and they actually agreed with me, and things I kind of got my way. But the point is that things like that can happen, and it wasn't the first time that it had happened. and it happened to another friend of mine in the same guild. And so there are, as I said before, there are positive and negatives to each one of these different systems. Now, like with the hoarding thing, this is another thing that's kind of a problem, is that players will only wait for, like let's say now, they'll only wait for like either a mythic or a socketed item in order to roll on it, or to put in their bid for the item. And so the reason that this is again an issue is because like you want people who actually want to upgrade themselves, and the odds of that happening are lower, and it actually hurts your progression because things actually go to disenchant or they go to off specs before people want to take them as possible side grades or minimal upgrades because they don't want to have to spend their points on them. And that's really, really kind of a problem because there are a lot of times where you do really want to take short-term upgrades to make a long-term gain. But whenever you have like a system like DKP or EPGP, it actually disincentivizes doing that. And so that's one of the main problems that I find with EPGP and DKP. Now, functionally, they pretty much are the same. DKP and EPGP, one other thing is that sometimes you have to do like some sort of a wipe or I guess like a taxation in a way of people who have been in a guild a long time because they have like, let's say like 1,000 DKP because they've been in a guild for 2 years. And so they can pretty much have priority over any item anywhere. And so it doesn't really have anything to do with their own performance. And also if somebody performs badly, but they have a lot of DKP, they still get an item. And so that's like, again, rewarding bad performance. And by rewarding bad performance, you're effectively disincentivizing good performance, or at least not rewarding good performance. And when you don't reward good performance, don't expect to get it. Now, the last system we're going to talk about is Loot Council. Now, Loot Council is what my guild uses, and it's what I think almost all of the like higher level rating guilds use. And the reason for that is Loot Council is probably the most able to be abused system, and it's also the most efficient at giving loot to the right players. And the way it's easily to be abused is that, of course, if you have somebody in the Loot Council who just kind of always votes for themselves to get gear, or let's say you have 2 people in the Loot Council and like they kind of always say, oh yeah, it should go to my buddy, or oh yeah, it should go to this guy, and so they're just giving each other loot all the time, and so it's not really like a I don't know, like it's not really like a conspiracy, but it's just kind of the way that things go. And people would like say, hey, maybe if I, like put in my word for this guy getting the item, then he'll put in his word for me getting an item. And so that's really like, it's very common for stuff like that to happen. And it's a big deal. And the reason that's a problem, of course, is because it fucks over everybody else in the raid. Now, in my guild, the way that we handle this is that we usually during progression, we used to have. We don't really do this too much anymore because we don't really have a whole lot of people that think that we're like liars or anything. But we used to always have promote one person up randomly from the office, from the raider ranks, just like a normal raider, to sit in on the loot discussions to know that everything was being done, I guess, like fairly and ethically. And so that's a good suggestion if your guild wants to run Loot Council. Also, another thing that's really required for Loot Council is trust. And you have to trust your people who are in the Loot Council. And it's really, really important to make sure that all of your raiders trust that the Loot Council is making decisions in the best way possible. Now, one thing that's also very good about Loot Council is that you can really, really easily gear the right people up because you decide pretty much who gets the gear. And also you can decide how you get the gear. In my guild, we prioritize pretty much how big of an item level upgrade it is, and also like pretty much a player performance. And so like if one guy is like not really doing that well and somebody else is like really trying, putting in 110%, all that other stuff, we're going to give it to the guy who's putting in 110, not the guy who's putting in about 75. And so even if it's a bigger upgrade for the guy who's putting in 75, because we want to, again, reward good performance, and also because that guy who's putting in 110 is probably going to have a higher percentage chance of being in the progression group, and so we can deck out the right people for the next boss that we're planning on killing. And so those are some really good ways that Loot Council can help you. But also, as I said, if you have people who think that the Loot Council is corrupt, and that can happen so easily. Like it's very easy to have that happen. And another suggestion that I would give anybody who's going to have a Loot Council guild as a distribution system is to have it to where people who are linking on items that they want. So like, let's say I link on an item, I don't comment on my own item. So it's not like I'm going to vote for myself. You know what I mean? Like if anything, I only comment that somebody else should get it instead of me. And so I never really put in a vote for myself. And so that's a very good thing too as well, just because, as I said, it's just, like ethical considerations, because of something that's like a lot of people like, that's why, they're there for the perps. Like, people like, they want the achievements too and the titles and everything like that. but they're really there for the perps. And so if you spend 4 hours wiping and then you get an item, you don't get an item because of something that you consider unfair, especially when another player, in your eyes, took it away from you. That's going to really kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth or in whoever it was who's thinking that's mouth. And so you really want to make sure that people trust the loot council system, and that's definitely something that I would not recommend like guilds starting out to use. Or at least if they were to use it, definitely promote up a couple of people to sit in on the discussions, not necessarily put in their 2 cents, because what the fuck do they know, but definitely make sure that you have some sort of transparency available. And another thing that's important with Loot Council, I just thought of this because of the what do they know comment, is that you have to make sure that everybody in the Loot Council actually knows what items are good for who. And so, like, even though I'm a warrior, I know that like multi-strike is a really good stat for mages, and we actually have a mage in our Loot Council, and so that's taken care of. And so like for rogues, like just like have a basic understanding of each class and what the stat priorities are, and also at least have somebody or a couple people in the Loot Council who collectively all know all of the classes and all of the specs, and so they can really determine, what's the biggest upgrade for who, and all the other stuff in between. And so, guys, these are the main loot systems that people use in raids. And again, I'll just kind of go over all of the different ones, and I'll talk about what kind of guilds you should use them. Group loot and personal loot are really good for starting out like semi-casual guilds, and also guilds that are just like kind of blur the line between pug and guild pretty much. And so when people don't really know each other too well, just starting out, definitely probably want to use some sort of of group loot or personal loot or something like that. The Suicide Kings is again more of a starting out thing. I personally would not recommend it at all, but I know that it is a method, and so that's why I wanted to talk about it. DKP and EPGP, as I said, I'm going to lump them together, but they are a little bit different. Functionally, they're kind of the same though. I would definitely say that this is better for a mid-range guild and also a high-level guild, but personally, I think Loot Council is probably the best method for a very high-level guild because of its ability to funnel gear to the correct players, and also complete 2 and 4% bonuses. Make sure healers get the gear over like a Shadow Priest or something like that, and make sure tanks get the gear over, I don't know, like a Gladiator Warrior. And so those are really important things that the Loot Council can do that other systems can't really do as well. And so anyway, guys, I hope that you guys understood this and it's helped you, because I know a lot of people have asked me about this. And, as I said, new tiers coming out, people are looking to decide, what kind of guild do I want to join. And so I wanted to give you guys my 2 cents on, the advantages and disadvantages of each different system and which one my guild uses. And so, as I said before, Loot Council, if you have a, really solid guild where everybody trusts each other, it will definitely give the loot to the right players in the most efficient way if used correctly. And EPGP, if you're just kind of like a mid-range guild and you just kind of want to have people come in there and just get kind of what they earned out of it. And group loot and personal loot if you're kind of just like basically just a pug. So anyway, guys, before I just keep going on and on, those are the methods that I'm aware of in terms of loot systems in WoW. If you know of another one, let me know, and I'll kind of give you my, I guess, line or two opinion on it, because I probably have heard of it. I just might not have thought of it for this video. So that's pretty much all I've got. Thanks for watching, and like, comment, subscribe.